So hi everyone, this is the first recording that I've done for a long time, and it's a real pleasure to doing this first one with Dr. Gary Fettke. Many of you will remember how we had a wonderful interview with him, and indeed later his wife Belinda, way back, believe it or not, 3.5 years ago. That 3.5 years has flown by. It's been a massive 3.5 years in all our lives for all sorts of reasons. So what I wanted to do was to catch up with Dr. Fettke and find out where he's at, and see if we can learn even more from him. So, Gary, do you mind if I call you Gary? We don't need to do the
No,
doctor
that's
thing.
fine. Gary works well because it's like Jack. They're both four-letter words.
Yes, yes. So you'll find that Gary's got a wonderful sense of humour. But Gary,
No, Jack, I wasn't being funny. There you are.
welcome to our little conversation. What might be useful, Gary, I think, is for you to assume that some of the people watching this don't know you. So a lot of them will be looking forward to it. I've already tipped them off that we're doing it. But it would be great if maybe you can give us a wee bit of your backstory, especially why you became famous. And then we can get into, if you like, where you're at now, what you see happening in the future, and any advice you can
I,
give us.
well, I actually don't know if I'm famous. I'm like infamous, maybe. It's. I mean, from the British aspect, my moment of infamity is diagnosing Billy Connoly's Parkinson's for him. So he refers to that on a few occasions about this crazy Tasmanian doctor.
Well, I didn't
So
know
that's
that.
a little known fact about that was in a hotel foyer and
Wow.
in Los Angeles actually.
Is that
And
right? Wow.
but I didn't diagnose his prostate cancer there. Okay,
No, okay. Yes,
that
yes.
requires a different bit of observation.
I can
So,
imagine. But
yep.
I didn't realize it was you. And I mean, he's a big hero for lots of us Scots, of course, in the fellow Glaswegian. But there you go.
But again, but I mean, his situation is we've forgotten the basics of medicine, and I know you got. I'll come. Our conversations are always tangential, but
Yes.
I diagnosed him because it's called the power of observation, and
Yes.
from seeing him in the past and seeing him again, and noticing the change. And I'm afraid medicine that we're not doing that power of observation. We send people off for tests. You have digital assessments.
Yeah.
Um, if you go to group practices now, so people don't have follow up with the one general practitioner or the one specialist. You go to, and then as a result of that, they end up with multiple medications, multiple complications, and rather than go and find out the root cause, you just go and treat the complications. That's quicker.
Yeah.
It's quicker, but it's not better.
No.
So I
No.
mean, I suppose you say famous, I'll say infamous, because essentially I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I've retired in the last couple of years since we caught up.
Oh, wow.
And we can talk about why I retired because
Yes.
there's so much insanity in the system.
Yeah.
And the whole COVID non-science mimicked a lot of other nonsense, which I've observed for the last few decades.
Yes.
So, so essentially, I've been an orthopedic surgeon for over 30 years. My practice, you can see just over my shoulder there's a golden toilet brush.
Oh, yes.
And
Yeah.
I have that with pride because my registrars, they gave me that toilet brush as a Christmas present one year in recognition of the work that I did in cleaning up all the shit. And I'm actually I put it there because I'm quite proud of it because I actually changed my letterhead, unofficially at some point in time, rather than sports surgeon or hip surgeon or knee
Yeah.
surgeon. I changed my letterhead to specialising in everything that nobody else wanted to do.
Right.
So, but there's something in that because over the years I ended up literally looking after most of the diabetic foot complications in northern Tasmania, which Tasmania is just off the south coast of Australia.
Yeah.
And I also looked after a lot of deep infections and joint replacements. And these patients came along with multiple problems. Once if you end up with a deep infection, or if you've got diabetes, you don't just have diabetes. You've also got heart disease. You've got early dementia. You've actually got metabolic health problems across the spectrum. And so, therefore, my practice over time became not just operating on people, but actually going back to the root cause. And in the process of that, I worked out that sugar is no good if you've got diabetes. It sounds like a no-brainer in 2024, but when I started talking about it, and I had patients in hospital with out-of-control diabetes, there was a guy in his 40s that I was contemplating amputating both of his lower limbs because of the complications. And I ended up taking one of his legs off. But essentially, he was in hospital. I'm trying to control his diabetes, and he's been given ice cream 3 times a day. And I said, you can put whatever expletive you want at the end of that.
Yeah.
And it literally was, these are the hospital food guidelines. It's okay with people with out-of-control diabetes to be given ice cream. Therein started my journey down the metabolic health pathway, where I started to work out the problems of sugar and ultimately the role of our Western diet in the promulgation of multiple health problems, not just obesity and diabetes, but right across the spectrum. And I can't remember if we talked about it last time, I've got a statement where, remember the old food pyramid?
Yeah. And
I'll say that if you eat by the food pyramid, you're going to die by the food pyramid, and along the way, you're going to look like it. And the trouble is, there's a bit of comedy there, but it's black comedy because it's actually truthful.
It's very true, yeah.
So ultimately, my scientific pathway through this, so my surgical pathway was about how do we try and turn around the metabolic health disaster. We've got the actual tsunami, the true pandemic that we've got is our metabolic health. Last figures that I have are 93.2% of the population have got metabolic health disease.
92%?
That's a really important 93.2. Now, that's now 2 years old, so I expect it's more than that. I'll come back to that because I think that's where a lot of the work I've done in the last few years is to recognise that number and use that number back against the system. So essentially, to cut a long story short, I came up with this thing called the metabolic or the nutritional model of modern disease based on inflammation. That our nutritional model of inflammation causes virtually all disease on the planet. And this is based on sound biochemistry, not opinion, not just, profit or profitability of the food industry, but the combination of sugar, refined carbohydrate, and polyunsaturated seed oils combine in the perfect storm to give us inflammation in every corner of the body, every cell of the body. And once you create that inflammatory problem, the body starts fighting against it. And then here we are, we've got obesity, we've got diabetes, we've got cancer, we've got autoimmune disease, we've got mental health problems, we've got bowel disorders. You name it, you can actually go to the bottom of that. The start of it, the root cause is inflammation. So if you do the opposite of that, which is you cut out the sugar, the carbs, the refined seed oils, that means having a diet of, in the process, I rewrote the dietary guidelines for the world. Can't remember where if I'd done that last time. And that is, here it is in one sentence. This is what I'm on about. And this is, what I got into trouble for. And it's we should be eating fresh, local, seasonal, whole food based on our culture and environment, avoiding added sugar and processed food. Now, in a nutshell, I've described what a lot of people have now heard of as low carb or low carb healthy fat or keto, or in its hardest core phenomenon is called carnivore. So at the basis of that, the biochemistry, the science of that is a diet low in carbohydrate, higher in healthy fats, and having good protein. And essentially, this is how dangerous I am. I'm actually advocating that you have, and again, I'll put it in the scientific terms, to survive, to be healthy, to evolve to where we are. The proper human diet, as Ken Berry will call, I call it the evolutionary diet, is that you need to have a diet that has a complete set of proteins. You need a complete set of healthy fats. You need complete micronutrients, the vitamins and the minerals. And you do not require a single carbohydrate to be ingested. No glucose, no fructose, cellulose, all of that. cellulose, no fiber. You do not need any of that based on science and biochemistry to survive. In fact, it's not about survival, it's about thriving.
Yeah.
And but what I'm talking about at a basic scientific level, and what we see with people right around the world who change their diet around to this, is they get dramatic improvements in their health, virtually everyone.
Yeah.
They get a normalization of weight. I mean, I'm not saying most people lose weight. Some people gain weight because they need to normalize weight.
Yeah.
They end up coming off a truckload of medications.
Yeah.
They're avoiding processed food. They're avoiding the takeaway food. They're avoiding all that crap in the diet. And guess what? Well, I've just got an echo here. They're healthier. Does that echo come to you?
No.
That they're healthier, they're requiring less medication, and the only people who are losing out is big food and big pharma.
Yeah.
So I regularly have meetings with politicians and I bribe them. I think it's really important to bribe politicians. Yeah. And I actually had one with our federal minister and I sat down with her and I said, look, I'd like to offer you somewhere between $30 and $50 billion per annum. Yeah, and her assistant was there. And I said, this is a bribe. Okay, so but it's a bribe to the entire government. Yeah. And it's literally, if you do this, and our federal member, she's great. I mean, to be fair, Bridget probably won't be listening to this, but I suspect she could be given time that one of the next prime ministers of Australia, if she plays her cards right.
Cool.
But so she's gone low carb, healthy fat.
She has.
She's given up sugar, carbs, and processed food, and she's reduced her weight, lost her arthritis pain, feels great, functioning infinitely better. We had a state election here. I don't know what would a county election? Do you have a county government?
Yeah, we have got local government elections, we would call them.
Yeah, we've got something in between local government and state government.
Yeah, I know the one you mean. Yeah.
So, and I put glucose monitors on a few of the politicians and their teams through the election. Had meetings with them, monitored them all off my phone, and they lost about 50 kilos, 100 odd pounds, 120 pounds between them.
Brilliant.
At a fraction of the cost of all those drugs. So a monitor here is $100. What's that? I don't know how much the CGMs are in Europe, in UK. Let's say let's say 35, 40 pounds.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
And in a 2-week period, they turned their lives around by finding out what the food that they ate did to their health. Now, essentially, that is perfect individualized patient care.
Yeah.
So I'm not making any broad statements in that. Okay, you eat this is what's going to happen to blood glucose. It's going to go up. This is if you exercise, this is what's going to go up or down. If you sleep, this is what's going to happen. If you go and get on the grog, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And then you make your own decisions based on that.
Yes.
They did feel as though I was a bit like Jiminy Cricket watching them, because I'd watch their blood glucose and I'd go up and down and I'd send a text message, and depending on who the politician was, it may have certain emojis on it. Yeah. And what have you just eaten? Poo emoji or something like that. What are you drinking right now?
Yeah.
But what's interesting is they were able to learn that unbelievably powerfully, very quickly.
Yeah.
And I've got a meeting with both parties coming up there in Parliament House, and we're going to have lunch. And the thing is, I said, if we can do this for you, now let's do it for the people.
Yeah, amazing.
And so, because everyone talks about preventative health and preventative methods, one of my arguments against preventative health measures, and here I'm talking preventative health, but if you think about preventative health, on the whole, like you get dollars back in return.
Yeah.
So it's worked out $5 to $10 or pounds for every pound or dollar you spend, you get multiples back. But the return on investment is longer than one electoral term.
Yes, of course.
There's so much in that, because that's why the pollies aren't interested in it, because it takes so long. However, if you put a CGM on it, so continuous glucose monitor, we've normally got one sitting around here.
Yeah, we had to go at it, but back then as well.
And so literally for a tiny cost, you can turn around people's weight, their health, their lifestyle, their diabetes. Like one time I got reported to the medical board. I was reported on multiple occasions for this dangerous practice. And that's because I reversed someone's type 2 diabetes on national TV.
You did it on TV? Wow.
Yeah, no, so you can't do that. Now, what was interesting at times, called the Saving Australia diet. And there were 3 of us that took patients on. Micheal Mosely was one.
Oh, wow.
Guys who know, myself, with Pete Evans, and a dietitian's patient. And Micheal Mosely's and my patients turned their diabetes around in 8 weeks.
Right.
And the dietitian's patient didn't do as well. Now, my patient actually beat Micheal, so it's my moment of glory. And Micheal Mosely, at that time, and has written books about this, is the 800-calorie diet and turning around diabetes. But it's low carb.
Yeah.
And my argument with that, my argument with Micheal, due respect and following his passing, is what do you do after 8 weeks?
Well, exactly. Yes.
And so, yes, if I fast everyone for 8 weeks,
it's not sustainable.
Then it's not sustainable. But however, low carb, that is.
Yeah.
You have a diet. If you reduce the carbohydrate over a long period of time, A, you don't need it. B, you get rid of. One of my talks is on YouTube called, it was one of my COVID talks. I went and did the science on it. Again, because you can't argue with the science, the biochemistry, it's just, that's what it is. So and the thing was, if we're going to demonize carbs, carbohydrate, sugar and glucose, I thought I'm going to try and find out what the toxic dose is.
Yes.
Rather than say, all carbs are bad, I was going, okay, I'm going to work it out. Yeah. So I actually came up with the argument that it was 4 grams. Wow. That's 1 teaspoon of sugar, 1 teaspoon of glucose, 1/5 of a slice of bread.
Wow.
Yeah. An 1/8 of an apple.
My goodness. Yeah. An 1/8 of an apple.
So at 4 grams, there starts to be a negative effect on the body. That's all. And it happens at a blood within the blood vessels. It happens within the kidneys. It happens within the circulation. It happens within the liver. All of these things kick on just with such a small dose.
Yeah.
Now, again, people can argue with me. Well, what's interesting, I don't know, that talk's been seen 500,000 times. I've presented it a few times to hundreds and hundreds of doctors and scientists. Nobody's argued with me.
No,
I said you can't say it. Well, so I am saying it. Yeah. Tell me where I'm wrong on the biochemistry and the science. And someone criticised me that one of my slides wasn't correct. I went, well, actually, go back, and it actually is. So I'm not trying. It's sort of frustrating because one of the things about being a surgeon is that we're known for being arrogant.
Yeah. But
I got into so much trouble with the system. Most of my colleagues abandoned me.
Oh, where did that go?
What has happened?
I don't know. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Something happened. I don't know what it was. But we're back. Let's keep going.
Where from?
Sorry?
Where from? Just keep going?
Yeah. We only lost a split second, I think. I don't know what it was.
Oh, okay. So along the way, I'm just standing up for the science. I'm standing up for the biochemistry. You've got an email from me. The email at the bottom says science evolves by being challenged.
Yes.
Not by being followed. That is evolution. That's the scientific method. That is, and the moment we abandon that and we say science is resolved, bang, it's the end of everything we do if we abandon the scientific method. I mean, we're constantly learning. I'm constantly learning. I'm still learning stuff, and I don't want to. My father, he said he doesn't go to sleep at night, and he's in his 90s now, but he does not go to sleep at night unless he's learned something new.
Yeah.
So that's inspirational. And he was, he'll openly admit, he's an uneducated man, didn't finish high school, but he's still, for many years he used to read the dictionary before he went to bed. And so, don't ever stop learning, but more importantly, don't ever stop questioning. And that's one of the things I gave a lecture to a few hundred medical students recently about this. I'm a controversial character, but nonetheless, since we've caught up, everything I've talked about with low carb, diabetes, mental health disease, cancer, you are now seeing that low carb ketogenic diets are becoming mainstream and are actually in national guidelines and international guidelines.
Yeah.
And I'm very proud to have been part of that process.
Absolutely.
So if you know you're right and it is what's happening around you is causing patient harm, not just self-harm or family harm, but patient harm, community harm, then stand up and do something about it. Yes, it comes at a personal cost and whatever. But I wrote a book many years ago, but I think one of the last things in it was, only dead fish swim with the current.
Yes, remember you saying that before.
It just you're truly alive when you're kicking up a storm and actually swimming against the current.
Absolutely.
I was playing golf recently, which I find is an incredible game because it's all against yourself, and it's a coming together of mind and body. And I'm not a great golfer, I'm not a lousy one, but it's just so. But I was on the first tee, waiting, and you can come off the first tee or the 10th tee, and it was a competition, and I'm there by myself, and I'm going, where are the other guys? It's the vets. I find that inspirational because you're playing with guys sometimes in their 80s who are still going, don't bet against them because they just go smack up the middle. They'll take the money off every time. Anyway, the other three guys turned up, and two of them were actually retired lawyers.
Right.
And first of all, they were down on the 10th tee, and I had to wave them and call them up and say, look, where are you? Come on, guys, get up here. And then the first thing I said to them was, didn't realize I was playing with three demented old fools today. And they told me, Fettke, because I'm, we all say our mind, because they're old lawyers, we also know each other.
Yeah.
And I said to them on the first tee, I said, it's not the first time in my life where I knew I was right and everyone else was wrong. And the two lawyers had a good old laugh because they've seen me up against the fight here for a long time. Yeah. And so it's okay to challenge. And I think one of the things I keep coming up against, and I don't know if I'm just getting older and wiser or just more older and crankier or whatever, virtually everything I find that's mainstream, you poke it, it's like a house of cards and it falls over.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
I came across a term for it. It's called Cassandra's curse.
Right.
Have you heard of Cassandra? No. So she's everyone can correct me on it. She's it might be Greek or Roman mythology, but it says long-term way back. But Cassandra had the ability to see the future,
right?
To try to tell everyone about it, but nobody would listen,
right? Yeah.
And so I talk about, and it's the same game plan. I talk, and it all starts with C's, like carbohydrates, cholesterol. I'll throw Coca-Cola in there. I'll throw COVID because there was so much nonsensical stuff that came up with.
Absolutely.
And I personally stopped working through it.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't do it to myself and to my patients and to the community. I was privileged enough to be on a small advisory group where we met up with about 20 politicians on a monthly basis. We had very interesting guest speakers from all around the world, Great Britain, US, a fellow by the name of Robert Kennedy. Who's written quite significant amounts of work about that whole time frame.
He's done amazing work with that area. Yeah. Yeah.
And again, what he did, and I've read his book cover to cover, and it's completely referenced and it's completely factual. He hasn't been sued by Gates or Fauci or whatever. It's just facts. Yeah. And so when you actually, I'll throw the same thing. We can throw conspiracies in there. I often say conspiracies aren't a conspiracy if they turn out to be facts. We can throw climate change in there. We can throw CO2 in there. We can throw currencies. We can throw cryptocurrencies in there. When you start delving into these topics, you find that the mainstream message is just blindsiding us.
Yeah.
And so the word cynical starts with the letter C as well. And I don't mean to be completely cynical. I'm still happily married to Belinda. She puts up with me. I think she rolls her eyes a fair amount.
Yeah.
And the grandchildren, the kids roll their eyes, and the grandchildren, I'm teaching them resilience at the moment. And so that's what. But dare to question, because all of these things happening around you, and it doesn't have to be at the highest level of government, but
No.
if your doctor says something to you, we'll say why or how. Just ask for a bit of explanation. I mean, I've got so many doctors have hammered me about this low-carb, healthy fat, dropping the sugar and carbs, dropping the grains and the cereals and the fibre and bumping the fats up there. And most of them, when they're criticism, they start off with the line saying, what about the cholesterol?
I know.
And my one line of response to them, okay, tell me what cholesterol is.
Yes.
And do you know how many doctors have been able to tell me what cholesterol is?
Zero, probably. Yeah.
Zero. I gave this talk to the medical students, and one of the final year medical students got it about 85, 90% right. And I stood there in front of her with my jaw down. I go, you have just beaten every single person I've asked that question. Patient, doctor, specialist, cardiologist. I was at a wedding a couple of years ago, and I was sitting next to a cardiothoracic surgeon.
Wow. And
he was going on about something, and I said, don't eat that. It's got, he said, oh, it's about the cholesterol. So I asked him about what the cholesterol is, and Belinda knew I was baiting him.
Yes.
I was getting kicked underneath the table, and I'm going, no, I'm not going to let him off the hook. He's a cardiothoracic surgeon, and he had it wrong, just wrong.
Yeah.
And I hope most people pick up on my frustration with the medical system. I don't think I'm a unicorn, but I don't think there are many of us out there.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to find more. And that last medical student conference, I gave a talk for an hour about, I don't want to talk, it's the failure of your medical education when you realise it's been conflicted by the food industry, the pharmaceutical industry. It goes back for over 100 years, the manipulation of the information, the data.
Yeah.
But it's so mainstream. Yeah. And we believe our teachers and we believe our textbooks because they believe their teachers and their textbooks. But when you find out the corruption goes all the way back to the temperance movement in the mid-1850s to 1860s, definitely 1900 to 1920. Yeah. And, people can go back to that talk you did with Belinda. She is the world expert on this historical aspect.
Yeah.
And so I'll go on about the science and she'll go on about the vested interests. And
yes. It's perfect, the perfect match.
But it's just fascinating because if I have done a couple of paid talks to the meat industry, by defined conflict of interest, not for a couple of years. Yeah. And I think part of the thing, actually, I didn't say it in the talk, but I did say it to a couple of CEOs of major industry afterward. I said, look, it's really important. If you're getting screwed from behind, really important to turn around and see who's doing it to you. And because the meat industry are being accused of being, very powerful and all sorts of, and I can tell you, I can guarantee for tens of billions of dollars industry just here in Australia, they are like a bunch of trying to herd cats. Totally disorganised. In general, all of their members are farmers looking after their animals, looking after the land, trying to do the right thing.
Absolutely.
They're not caught up in this whole, the vegan influence and the politics and the money, and the vegans the vast majority of them do not realise that they're being manipulated by the food industry and the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and that they've become foot soldiers for all of that non-science, which sounds a lot like nonsense. And so I go through varying degrees of passion and anger, but then I have moments when I find 20 medical students that followed Belinda and myself out of that lecture and just wanted to hear more and learn more and question me for another hour and a half after I've just given an hour and a half talk.
Fantastic.
And I find that inspirational because that's the future. And those guys are the ones that are going to be looking after me and you.
Yeah.
And I like chatting to you because you're out there questioning. And I'll podcast with whoever wants to actually try and do good.
Yeah.
By giving people a message which they're not going to hear down the mainstream media, which is having its advertising paid for by the food and pharma industry.
Well, one of the coincidences this morning on the Guardian online here, there was a piece about our NHS getting excited about what they're calling the soup and shake diet, which is 900 calories, and they're getting people to reverse out of type 2 diabetes, but it takes a year. And there's all sorts of excitement around it. And it's back to what you said earlier. As soon as I read it, I thought, but that's not sustainable. No human being can do that. So, and then they said they would gradually reintroduce food, but we can imagine what kind of food they'll gradually reintroduce. So, but that's one thing. Just to reflect back on what you said. Another thing
on that, two things.
Yeah,
two things. The Guardian has significant funding from the vegan vegetarian organisations. Number one. Number two, the 800 calorie shake drinks, the Oxford group in particular, who promote that. The Cambridge. It's called the Cambridge Eating Plan. Is a pyramid scheme. And the researchers who actually came up with it and who promote it and literally shove that information down the throats of the politicians in the UK and here in Australia are at the top of this pyramid scheme.
Wow.
And so they're receiving significant funding.
Yeah.
And look, I'll respect Micheal Mosely. He writes a book about 800 calories, okay?
I know.
And it talks about the 5-2 diet and all that sort of thing. I get that, but he's not actually, he wasn't.
Do you not think he was getting there though? I wondered about when over the years I've bought some of his books, I've skimmed some of them, and I could see where ultimately I thought he was heading to inevitably keto, and if not even carnivore. I think he was going there.
I think, but again, he's got mainstream companies he's working with.
I know.
But 5-2 is sustainable.
Yeah, of course it is.
800 calories was sustainable for 8 weeks, but you then had to move on to something else. But these guys are promoting shakes. Anything that I often say to people, if you've got to read what's in the food, if you've got to read the label, don't eat it.
Exactly.
Now you can go buy a carton of eggs that says eggs.
Yeah.
It's meat. It says meat. Just cheese. Just work out if it's an animal or an artificial rennet. Wow. Okay, but it's cheese.
And there's another thing just to see if I can tease out what you're recommending going forward, where you think you're going, and why you retired and all that. But just briefly, one of the things I heard recently was an actual doctor saying to one of the people who I'm involved with, and saying, I can't speak about this officially, but I've got to stick to the guidelines. But she said, but we are now noticing that people who are going on low carb and keto diets are doing amazingly well across the board. But that was the first time I think I've ever heard a doctor admit that. But here in the UK. But moving on, Gary, because we've only got a bit of the time, I really want to see. Tell us about what caused you to now retire, and what are you doing going forward? Where do you see it going?
Look, I'm doing a lot of politics, guideline reform, all of those sorts of things. 2 years ago, I gave a lecture to 40 or 50 endocrinologists on how to manage diabetes as an orthopedic surgeon. You could imagine what sort of SH storm that was. But it did culminate in setting forward the process of low carb in what we call therapeutic carbohydrate reduction, which now is in the Australian National Diabetes Strategy. It's been adopted by the Australian Diabetes Society because it's their idea now.
Yeah.
And the guideline's been written, it's been adopted by Diabetes Australia. And that house of cards, and the Dietitians Association here in Australia, who I've had so many blues with over a long period of time, now are having educational courses in it, written by people that I'm working with. So, because this is where I feel, and I'll come back to that 93.2%. Virtually all dietary guidelines in Western society are for healthy people to be healthy.
Yeah.
And they determine the education in the schools and medical medicine and nursing. They determine the food served in hospitals and in nursing homes, educational facilities, what's served to the defence forces and in our prisons. Most Western defence forces are now struggling with obesity and diabetes and metabolic syndrome. So if we look at the fact that the dietary guidelines are for healthy people. Yeah. So I've worked it, and let's flip that around. Let's invert that and go, actually, the dietary guidelines are irrelevant for 93.2% of the population. They're only relevant for that 7%, roughly.
Yeah.
So, okay, that's fine. Give the 7%, they can eat what they want. And when they get sick, then they will have a medical condition that requires a condition-specific dietary intervention.
Yeah.
Because the vast majority of conditions are lifestyle related and they require a lifestyle solution, not a medication solution.
Yeah.
So therefore, as it turns out, if you have type 2 diabetes or you have pre-diabetes, and if we test hard enough, that is at least 2/3 of the population, including children, heading down that pathway. Therapeutic carbohydrate reduction is now the first line of management in the management of type 2 diabetes and pre-diabetes and children's obesity and metabolic syndrome. Wow, all of a sudden we've written the dietary guidelines for the world for 2/3 of the population.
Yeah, yeah.
And the Dietary Guideline Committee, where the government's spending enormous amounts of money, that's not applicable to them. So let's find dietary guidelines which are condition specific. Now, as it turns out, in mental health, there's an enormous amount of work being done on there. If you eat crap food, you're going to have poor mental health. You're going to require more medications. You're going to be in and out of hospital, blah, blah, blah. And so therefore, ketogenic diets been used in epilepsy for 100 years. Again, nerve dampening, help with mental health. So what we do is we take the same dietary guideline, which has been written by the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners in the US. They're based in the US, but they're worldwide, international members. Conflict of interest, I'm a member, founding member of it. Again, received no money, but I was involved in writing the initial dietary guidelines. So all we do is we cross out type 2 diabetes and we write mental health. Yes, okay, we take chronic kidney disease, which requires a diet. Let's cross out type 2 diabetes and write chronic kidney disease. We put in cancer, cross out cancer, we cross out diabetes and put in best management of cancer for prevention. And that's it.
Yeah.
So, and I know, and again, I'm painting with a broad brush, but virtually every metabolic health problem, which accounts for virtually every metabolic condition on the planet, will improve if you put the right fuel in the body.
Yeah.
You know, we pay far more attention to what fuel we put in our cars than what we put in our bodies.
Yeah.
Says the man whose car broke down in the garage yesterday. Right? But it was a fuse that shorted, and we took a while to work it out. So, you know, I'll come back. If the vast majority of conditions have a lifestyle cause,
that happened. I don't know why that happened. It happened again. That's weird.
So if the vast majority of conditions have a lifestyle cause and they require a lifestyle solution, that's what we should be aiming for. That's called holistic health.
Yes.
And if you put a CGM on them, at a fraction of the cost, that's cost. But what's really interesting, some work we've been looking at and following up on, you're not allowed fat shaming, right? Yeah. You're not allowed to shame people because they're fat. Okay. Yeah. Are you aware that where the fat shaming and the obesity stigmatization literatures come from?
Yeah.
If you look at that data for the last 10 years, the vast majority of it has involved funding from Novo Nordisk.
Yeah.
Novo Nordisk produces Ozempic and Wegovy, which are diabetic drugs, but now being used around the world in weight loss.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And they are so Novo Nordisk has come up with the marketing term of fat shaming. And if you can turn that lifestyle condition that requires a lifestyle solution into something which is a medical problem, which requires lifetime medication at an exorbitant price, it is the perfect marketing tool.
Yeah.
And are you aware that Novo Nordisk now has the greatest capitalization of any company in Europe? All right. And it's literally on the back of one drug or two drugs, which is being used off-label, not for diabetes management, but weight loss. And here in Australia, it's roughly $20,000 per annum, weekly injections. Oh my God. But it has been marketing. And when you track it backwards, you find the literature has been on obesity stigmatization, and obesity societies, which are funded by these pharmaceutical companies, are literally, so all I'm doing is just calling the bluff.
Yeah.
But so, and I'll use the comparison here. For $20,000 per annum, you can go on Wegovy or Ozempic and end up with all of its complications. It's incredibly expensive. Yeah. It's got multiple complications which the industry deny. Yeah. Or I can put a glucose monitor on you instead of $20,000, $100. Yeah. We follow you for 2 weeks. We turn around your life for a fraction of the cost and zero side effects.
Yeah.
Who am I upsetting with that argument? I'm upsetting big food, big industry. Yeah. I want to put CGMs on every patient in hospital.
As soon as they go in.
And I will get rid of hospital food.
Yeah.
Within days. I used to prescribe cheese and eggs on the medication chart for my patients in hospital because they couldn't get it. So I wrote it there. This patient has to have 2 eggs a day and 2 pieces of cheese. And then if the hospital didn't supply it, then they were negligent because I'd prescribed it as a medication. Yes. And I had people with chronic ulceration of their legs, deep infections, and literally that very small amount of complete protein, which means it's animal-based, you could see their legs turn around within 2 or 3 days.
Amazing.
And I'm not talking about massive diets of just eating 15 steaks a day and,
No.
I'm not. I'm talking about putting, and this has been done in developing nations. We find a lot of African nations and India in particular are iron deficient because of the vegetarian diets.
Yeah.
And you literally introduce very small amounts of animal protein and meat into their diets and the children, and you just watch their cognition improve dramatically.
Yeah.
It's just fascinating, this journey we've had for me trying to avoid operating.
Yeah.
Would have made a lot more money just by operating, but this has been a fascinating journey. I mean, am I famous? I don't know. Everyone's famous in their own bathtub, maybe, but that's about it. We just think we've done the right thing, and I'm just very fortunate that Belinda was there to support me at the darkest times when the entire system was telling me I'm wrong.
So you've been making, you see in since we last spoke, 3.5 years, you do see progress. I think I see progress. And I've got people now who, because of interviewing people like yourself back then, who are sharing with me, and I'm now interviewing them because of the progress. It's just dramatic, turning around all sorts.
But that's cool, isn't it? I mean,
it's amazing.
That's the butterfly effect. You never know how far your message is going to go and who's listening. And and you may need to hear the message multiple times for it to actually resonate. And it's at some point in time it resonates. Oh my God, I heard about that before. That makes sense. I'd like to try that now.
Yeah. So
here in Australia, this is I have a slide which I use in my talks. Here in Australia, I've already won because you can buy at least 7 or 8 different low-carb beers. So you can go to the pub, you can simply go to the grog shop, and there's a choice of multiple different types of low carbohydrate beer. I'm not advocating drinking beer.
No, but it's
I'm just saying the market has responded. It drives me insane the number of low carb health bars, which are highly processed. I'm not advocating that.
No.
But the fact is that you can go to a restaurant and say, actually, I don't want to have a side of chips and vegetables and rice and pasta. Yeah. I'd just like to have meat and a bit of above-ground vegetables.
Yeah.
Very low carb, very healthy, non-inflammatory. And then if we do go out, I ask them what they cook in.
Yeah.
Now, what oil are you cooking in? Oh, we've got the healthiest cottonseed oil. I don't know if we talked about that. The half-life of those inflammatory seed oils, the vegetable oils, is about 4 years. So if you have takeaway,
that's just shocking, isn't it? 4 years.
So you can reverse the effects of high sugar and high carbohydrate within days. Yeah, unfortunately, the inflammatory aspect of the seed oils takes 4 years. Belinda's sister, and I'm allowed to tell this story, was diagnosed with MS, multiple sclerosis, and she went this pathway. And about 4 years down the track, all of the symptoms disappeared.
Yeah.
Again, that story's been repeated, that you'll continue to improve for years. But that's okay.
I mean, I interviewed someone a few weeks ago. We lost the recording. We're going to do it again. Who's reversed out of MS, just by coming into this and going carnivore as well, doing it extreme. One of the ones I was going to ask you, just because. So we see MS. What about, and we do see there's great stories of people, especially older people, reversing out of, or apparently reversing out of the dementia. What are you seeing anything with Parkinson's disease?
Yeah, there's Stephen Canane, Cunane, has been doing a lot of work in the US in this pathway for a long time.
Yeah.
Seeing people who've been diagnosed with dementia.
Yeah.
And going back to work. I'm not saying that's a good outcome. I don't know if you want to go back to work after you've retired, but nonetheless, their functional outcomes improve dramatically. And a lot of people with dementia are being cared for by their family, by their spouses.
Yeah.
And so the spouse and the family have total control over what food comes into the house.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you try it for a little bit? We know that dementia, there's some forms of dementia have an altered metabolism of glucose in the parietal lobe of the brain.
Yeah.
But when you actually look at the metabolism of ketones, it's actually a more efficient fuel for the brain.
Yeah.
It's sort of where the ketogenic diet comes from. Where the ketones, they've actually got normal metabolism of ketones. Yeah. So why wouldn't we're so fortunate. Our bodies are happy to run on hybrid, on 2 fuels, in fact, 3 fuels. And if it's not working well on a highly inflammatory carbohydrate, sugar-driven diet, and it's got poor perfusion in that part of the brain and poor function, and you can switch over to a ketogenic diet, then it's got a role to play across every single neurodegenerative disorder, of which Parkinson's is there, motor neuron disease, dementia, multiple sclerosis. And because it costs nothing, apart from time, effort, and support, why wouldn't you try it?
Yeah. Can I ask you, time's quickly running out. So I'm really grateful for that contribution. Here's another one. You mentioned your grandchildren. I've got grandchildren. What's your thoughts on children helping parents move towards this kind of thinking? What's happening there? Any breakthroughs?
Children moving their parents towards it, or parents moving their children towards it, or both? Well, I did a presentation. Our daughter, the last grandchild, she had severe morning sickness.
Right.
And it made me think about morning sickness, ketogenic diets, and pregnancy.
Right.
And the old wives' tale is the worse your morning sickness, the healthier the baby's going to be. So I just thought I'd try and research it, because I thought, okay, I'm an orthopedic surgeon, might as well look into obstetrics as well. I'm actually published in the Journal of Gynecology. That's another something. There's a story in itself. I developed a surgical technique with some colleagues to work out an operation to help with women's prolapse of the vagina.
Right. Wow.
It just happened. I was ran off to the side. But the literature's there. If you have severe morning sickness, you are in deep ketosis.
Right.
And that is, therefore, the work's been done on tens of thousands of women and the outcomes with the babies. So if you want to do the perfect experiment, you want to test it on unborn babies in the most critical time of development, which is first and second trimester.
Yeah.
And then you want to test them. Now, if you'd wanted to try and do a test on unborn babies, you'd never get it past an ethics committee.
No.
However, it's already been done. So if you look at the outcomes of women with severe gestation, with morning sickness, their babies they have less miscarriages. The babies are more likely to be normal weight. There's less perinatal complications. The children have less complications. They have less deformities. They have less congenital abnormalities. They thrive and they're more likely to have a higher IQ. Wow. You take the converse, which is women with gestational diabetes. Those children are more likely to be high and low birth weight babies. They're more likely to miscarriage. They're more likely to have perinatal complications, more likely to have obesity as they go down through life, more likely to have high and low blood sugars, more likely to have attention deficit disorder and learning disabilities, and more likely to have congenital abnormalities than the environmental ones, which are cardiovascular disease. So we've already done the experiment on the most critical time of growth, development, brain development, human development, everything.
Yeah,
on whether or not ketogenic diets are safe. So I've had a few obstetricians tell me I was way out of my depth and wanted to throw me under the bus again. But I also had a whole lot of obstetricians who wrote to me, from social media world, saying, "Wow, I'd never thought about it like that. That's the old wives' tale, which proves the healthy."
Can I ask you, I've got a few minutes and I don't want to lose this just because you've said something. So if a gestational, if that's the right word, forgive me, a diabetes mother subsequently gives birth to their children, and these potential things are out there, presumably going keto for the children will start to work against any of those things forming. Would that be a fair assumption?
We know that ketogenic diets are safe in children.
Yeah.
There's been multiple examples. Our grandchildren are relatively keto. They have a bit of fruit. They're not zero carb. But I can say they've got no side effects. I think they're outstanding and incredibly healthy and intelligent, a bit like their grandfather and all that sort of thing. And but they're still better looking than me. It's just a complete no-brainer. If you put the right fuel in your body, independent of your age, whether or not it's in pregnancy or in newborns or young children or adults, it makes it. I know of a fellow who was 95 who started doing a ketogenic diet so he could do more bushwalking. Now, I haven't heard from him for a couple of years, but I bumped into someone who said, "I know Ken." I said, "How is he?" He's still bushwalking, and he must be 97, 98 now. So in his 90s, he decided to do it so he could get better cognition and better function and better bushwalking.
Yeah.
Have we covered every age group there?
Yeah, we've cracked it. Look, we've only got a few minutes. Is there anything you'd like to say to the guys who're going to watch this? They're going to be inspired, men and women, probably, hopefully children. Anything you'd like to say before we tie it up?
Never stop questioning.
Yeah.
Never be afraid of doing that. And we live in a society where you still can do that.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem right. It's probably not right.
Yeah.
Let's go on a gut instinct a little bit more.
Yeah.
Only dead fish swim with the current.
That's it. That's it. Well, Gary, I could speak to you for hours. I'm sure everybody could listen to you for hours. Maybe we'll get you on again if you don't mind sometime in the future.
Well, let's not leave it 2.5, 3 years. Okay.
No, please not. Please not. Maybe you could put a good word in for me with Belinda. Maybe I can get her back on and she can tell me how her stuff's developed.
You're the persuasive one. I also know my spot. Okay.
Gary, listen, all the best, mate. Everything you're
It's all right.
doing, just I hope it continue to open minds, challenge people, and you've got a wonderful way about you. And I think your sense of humor is just amazing. Thanks for being our first guest, going back into these cycles we're going to be doing after a long break. I can't thank you enough.
Welcome back, because what you're doing is, I can't reach everyone in the world.
No.
And it's, we've got the Olympics on at the moment. And it's about passing the baton, but you want to make certain you're passing the baton to the right people.
Yeah. Well, we're all doing the best.
I'm optimistic about the future, because you have to be.
Yeah.
I also suffer from hyper-pragmatism, which means all this shit's going on around us. Excuse the language.
Yeah.
It's a vernacular.
Yeah.
It's, how do you position yourself in it? How do you position your family in it?
Yeah.
How do you raise your grandchildren?
Yeah.
Into that.
Yeah.
And someone, I was talking to someone recently. I said, "What are you teaching grandchildren?" And I said, I mentioned it before, resilience.
Yeah.
And that's all. And life's fun. We won't be around forever. And
No.
let's go sliding into that final base with a flurry of dirt and dust and
and still walking through the countryside at 99 or 100 or whatever. But Gary, listen, we better pull it together or we'll get chopped off. So I hope to see you soon, Gary. I'm sure everybody's going to keep their eye on you. Is there any place you would like them to go and reach out to you? Is there anything special they should follow?
Most of our talks, Belinda's and mine, are on YouTube.
That's
and
right.
we podcast with different people around the world to help them.
Yeah.
And I'm on Twitter. We do a little bit on Facebook. I'm on Instagram, but I don't understand it. And
yeah, neither do I.
And we're contactable, and we support people all around the world all of the time.
What's your Facebook page? What's your Facebook page?
Belinda took it over. It's Belinda Fettke, low carb, healthy fat now, because in the midst of all that stuff, it was Gary Fettke, no fructose, and then Belinda Fettke, no fructose. And I'm on Twitter as Gary Fettke, fructose, no. But I mean, I think Twitter X is fast, it's quick, there's so much to learn there.
Yeah.
And it just points in the right direction.
Okay.
But our big stuff is on YouTube. So.
Okay, of course. Well, Gary, again, thanks a lot. Absolutely brilliant. So, folks, there you go. The first one's in the can. It's absolutely been amazing. Reinforcing lots of things we all believe, of course, maybe not necessarily finding it easy to keep up with. But I'll see you all soon. Thanks again, Gary. Bye now. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Catch up, Jeff. Thank you, mate.